Hello once more. You're here on the Virtually Agile podcast. I'm Chris Stone, the Virtual Agile Coach, and today I'm joined by a fellow human-centric individual, a keynote speaker and the author of multiple books, including People Before Tech, The Importance of Psychological Safety and Teamwork in the Digital Age. Welcome to the show,
Thank you very
Duena
much for
Blomstrom.
having me. I hope you guys can hear me fine. We've had a couple of tech difficulties as usual, but not anything that will stop us from having this conversation.
Genuinely about 27 minutes, I think. Well, actually, maybe more than that of tech issues to get us here having this conversation. So it's
Right.
been hard work on our side, and we've remained committed to the cause. So hopefully this session will prove valuable to you folks. Now, Duana, for any of our listeners who aren't familiar with you and your work, tell us a bit about your
Oh, the
journey.
part I hate the absolute most, whether it's my show or anyone else's show, but I will attempt it. So I guess the easiest way to put it is I have an agile fetish, and the older I get, the more I believe. I also have a neurodiverse mind that happens to have facilitated this agile fetish. And I think this is the core of why I fell in love with different interpretations of this over the years. So I've worked in technology where I saw most home for my ideas in the last 20 something years, but that means both in banking, in particular in fintech, and then moving away from that into back into the core of the issue, which is no organization is healthy enough to do technology the way we would like it to. And I'm sure we're going to get into these. But once I realized, I came to the idea of human that I just had a moment of this, unfortunately, cannot be unseen. And this is what we're going to be doing for the rest of our days, which is to keep telling people they have human debt, keep telling people they have to do human work. And we had better do that in an agile way. That's really my only connection these days, other than to make this product, like I say, that does precisely that, tries to kind of keep humans focusing on the things you've mentioned, and then write about it and raise awareness with every waking moment.
Well, there we go, folks. This is the first guest to ever describe themselves as having an agile fetish. So, not that we're going too far into the world of kink on this show, but an agile fetish is the first time I've had someone describe it as that.
You
So,
have
what a
a
great way
video
of putting it.
podcast. Not everyone
And
does,
you've
and this is
also,
a first, I suppose, because we're moving as much as we can. Obviously, people understand the confines of science, but there's an actual, proof of this on my proper arm. I can show you a proper picture. Maybe we'll put that somewhere, where that shows I'm not just saying. So I do have an agile view of the world, not an agile view of the world. I have a need for the clarity and structure that you can get out of a to do doing done structure.
for anyone who is just listening, Duena's raised her arm, and on her forearm, she has a Kanban
That's right.
board. 3 columns.
That's
Is it three columns? The standard
yes.
Kanban
To do doing
process?
that.
To do,
Yeah. To do
in progress,
right.
to do, doing, done. Beautiful. Now the question I have is your doing column,
Oh,
is
I
it
have a
limited?
great story about that. I normally don't. I was keeping it for our podcast, but fine. Let's all share. When I had this done, I wasn't. I hadn't really planned it. I knew I wanted something that shows my entire philosophy somehow. So I thought it was going to take forever. But I got to the artist that was doing all of my coloring, and once we finished one and I knew I was going into something else, I just said, you know what, let's get this thing that's the essence of me down now. So I sketched it down and I was like, I just want this to do doing done. And so she's done the columns and then she's colored them. And then the time came where she was going to put the black tickets on, right? So essentially the black square representations of a ticket. And so she's put in the to do column, we put some that represented things that are big in my life that I'm still trying to accomplish. And those are about, not about, they're seven. And so she got those in there mostly for pretty. I didn't quite object on how many and stuff. And then in the done column, those really represented things like the baby or managing IVF or, getting a home or moving countries or starting winning Finovate or whatever. And so I put a couple of those done, loads of those done there. And then we literally on purpose left the middle for last. And she put the first two, and I was like, I'm good, I'm done, those are them. And she went like, no, it looks very unbalanced. So I sat there for an hour and a half and I explained to my tattoo artist, who was from, I think she's from Kazakhstan, and her husband works at Facebook, why work in progress must be limited. And I don't care what the tattoo looks like, but I cannot have more than two things in there. So yeah, that's what happened with the tattoo.
I love that. Well, I'm glad it does have a limit on that column. We shouldn't have too many things in parallel. You alluded to a concept there that I'm sure many of our listeners may be unfamiliar with, human debt. What is human debt, Duena, and how would you describe it to perhaps a
Oh God,
5-year-old?
I wouldn't. I would promise a 5-year-old by the time they grow up, there won't be any. We'll try our very best, but but I think my definition is evolving, and it's nice to have come up with something because you can kind of go, well, I've sort of changed my mind, and it's evolved into this and that. But it hasn't really evolved quite as much as I would have liked it. So essentially, one morning as I was writing emotional banking, I was just getting super frustrated about not really putting the essence of my up in armness into the book. And I was like, well, what is really keeping us back from us banks? At the time, I was in fintech and I was identifying with my client, obviously. What is really keeping us back from genuine agile, from really making technology like they do in Silicon Valley, from caring about our consumer, because otherwise you're not really making any agile, from human-centric design? What is holding us back? What's the deal? On the one hand, they don't even know, but that's a kind of a, I've been on and on here for years explaining why it's important and how they should get all of this direct to consumer connection, whatever kind of. But what they're not, am I allowed to swear on your podcast? I forgot to ask, sorry. You baby
Swear,
Jesus.
please swear away.
You'll be cleaning
I
this for the
welcome
next
it.
3 years, if not. So it's like all of those things make sense, but the real problem you're having, I'm so sorry, guys, something fell live. If nothing falls, then it's not a good podcast. So the real problem we're having is about something in common that I've seen in many other organizations, which is something is holding you back. It's some form of you're having a collective hypnosis moment where your emperor is butt naked and no one's saying anything. Why are these happening over and over again? So I sat down and I thought, this is in common with everywhere else I've seen it. This is exactly like that thing that they're getting in technology that we cannot afford to make if we're going to make good products, which is technical debt. But we've gotten this, but for people. Every time I've talked to these people over the years, they were either changing leadership or they had forgotten to do the human bits or they don't really care or it's a Friday initiative. Every time that they haven't done the right things, they've acquired more of this, what I call human debt. And it's exactly like cutting corners and not testing and writing crap code and not really caring if that's a valid piece of software that ended up in the hands of the client. It's exactly the same thing, cutting those corners before the people bit. Anytime we've changed leadership without explaining it to our people, anytime we didn't care about their purpose, anytime we didn't care about them being, kind of overworked and being in a mental health crisis like they are now, all of those things are creating more human debt. And the more human debt you have as an organization, in my view, the less likely it is you can ever go back to tabula rasa and say, right, how do we put everything right and make a high performing organization, right? The more you have, the further you are from having happy and super high performing employees, in my opinion.
So we're basically likening technical debt, wherein the more that builds up, the poor quality codes, the old monolithic systems that are difficult to maintain and update, we're likening that, which slows down your ability to deliver new things and at a good quality
Sustainable way.
and in a a sustainable way. We're likening that to the other side of things, the non-technical side, the people side, and we're saying when we allow this to build up, it results in disengaged people, it results in burnout, and it becomes that much harder to fix because you've kind of pushed it to the side. It's become side of desk. It's become one of those Friday initiatives where you might get a few hours off at the end of the Friday to focus on something that you want to do, but it's always side of desk rather
Priority.
than a proper initiative
That's
that there's
right. That's
time built in
exactly it.
for.
So I firmly believe, and look, I'm at the end of a 3 or 4 years very intensive journey into what exactly is the problem. So once I've decided that I need to figure out what this human debt is, I was stunned. I was like, why don't they want to clean it? Of course, I mean, I lie for a while. I went out there and I went, oh my God, this is the thing. This is the thing that's holding us all back in all industries. Let's fix it. And in my kind of starry-eyed insanity, I didn't realize that I was starting conversations in boardrooms. I was starting conversations in conferences, and I would keynote saying, oh my God, human debt is exactly like tech debt. We need to get rid of it. Until the first CTO and then many others like him put their hands up, and do you want me to be honest? We are doing exactly the same thing we're doing with tech debt, nothing. And I was like, well, this is a serious issue we have with everything. Then we got to start doing things. And, to a degree, it's easy to vilify the organization and this mythical Santa Claus like situation that's brought us here. And the employer is a horrible human being. And this is not at all about that, right? I'm not talking about the unionizing. I'm talking about we have gotten to a part in our development as knowledge workers where it doesn't work to have the structures we used to have. It doesn't work to have the departments we used to have because they don't work for us anymore. And it doesn't work to have the behaviors and the structures of relationing that we used to have because they don't work for us anymore. The hierarchy doesn't work for us anymore. We need more servant leadership and lack of command and control than we can carry. The way we let teams interact with each other with fear and lack of trust and lack of knowing each other and lack of emotional connection does not work. We cannot be making technology anymore like that. And letting people work as individual contributors in their own little bible of flow is amazing, and we should get more of that. But we should also teach them how to do their human work to be able and capable to be resilient and sustainable for themselves and for the team. So these are completely new skills we need to. th- this is a complete revolution in the workplace, and people talk about it, and it's such a big deal, and we can talk about it until we're blue in the face. But realistically, and I'll say this until I die, unfortunately, nothing's going to change until we all go right. We've kind of left the super behind. We need to do what I call the human work. What does it mean? What the hell do we do so we come up to the levels that we need to be at so we make use of technology? Now I take a breath and you're like, what?
So if we take take a deep breath. Okay, so we've got human debt, and you've introduced a new term there, human work. So what are some examples of human work that may overcome some of the challenges with human debt?
Everything is human work. Everything we need to do that isn't operational or mechanical or logistical or day-to-day ops. So when you're not writing code, you're probably doing some element of human work. Any meeting has an element of human work, and you should approach it as such. Any any time that you are brought into a group situation to offer your insight is essentially that as well. So I think it's really important that we, first and foremost, before we discuss what are the things that can make our life better, before we even take it back to lack of command and control, autonomous teams and empowered teams and value and purpose, and before we go back to those things, all very true, all very important. And one thing I say is, if you really want a shortcut, go to Aristotle's results and just do those 5 things, as if anything on life would be that simple, and then we would not have what to talk about. But there are no shortcuts, right? Those are big, immense chunks of work. To do those chunks of work, they're all human work. Anything at all we need to do that isn't writing code as a knowledge worker, or isn't, kind of clicking on some buttons, and potentially automatable, is human work. Anything at all. Our conversation now, our thinking time, our creative time, our group time, it's all human work that involves not only the thing you're giving as knowledge, but the thing you're giving as relationing, as your the way you're presenting yourself, the way you're relationing with others, whether or not you're invested. And finally, let's introduce the most important term, because we've touched on Google, which is, do you have something called psychological safety? I'm sure something you talk about all the time. And I've seen some amazing resources from your side on the topic. So finally, back to the question, all of these are important. Get psychological safety, get dependability, meaning let's get it agile to the bone and really get dependability. Get structure and clarity, because you don't have an organization without structure and clarity. Impact and purpose. Do we really need to have this conversation in 2023, in particular, with all these kids that are coming from behind and going like, don't give me purpose, I don't need to be in your enterprise. No, but the one thing we can and should work on at the team level is, in my opinion, psychological safety, because that's going to introduce your people to the human work, of which they're going to have to do as much as the other work in the near future.
Thank you. So what you've just done there is you've introduced, for anyone who's unfamiliar, the Aristotle project conducted by Google, where they did some research on hundreds of teams. I think it was
50,000
180
people.
teams, and what they learn. Sorry, 50,000 employees. Yeah, so lots of teams, lots of people, and they learned the most important factor in creating a high performing team was five things, but namely psychological safety at the top. And then you went through the others. You went for, I think, dependability, structure and clarity, meaning and purpose. But the one that you believe is most important, psychological
Undoubtedly, I
safety.
think so. I think it all starts there. Exactly. Well done. See, we have two very different minds. You're capable of bringing it back in a way that people understand. I get all up in arms about we need to move faster. We need to do something. Um, and I'll make another observation that I haven't really explained many other places, but I know you will understand it. So I'm just more telling you a story. I have had as a product owner and as a chief product officer or whatever, like as the mother or grandma of our product, I have had a moment of genuine come to Jesus, because we make a thing that is useful for many layers and many people of an organization. But the people I have made it in my heart of heart for, who were getting most use of, which were the developers and the knowledge workers, were not necessarily my client. And I have unfortunately tried to bypass my client. That's not wise. My clients themselves need a lot more work than I thought they would. And these clients are a structure that might not be useful in the near future in an organization, but for now it exists, and they are in theory tasked with the people task. So I have had to go back to the drawing board, and instead of giving developers what they need, is give the people that can give developers what they need as well. So we're now trying to help them help developers. So instead of kind of trying to admit that we don't really need HR because all our DevOps people know a lot more about what people need than HR, we're going to have to make them useful, I believe. And to make them useful, we have to figure out what kind of insane KPIs is the organization giving them instead of these ones that matter. Kind of what are they being asked to do, instead of make people have EQ, make people be able to relate to each other, make people understand why they're burnt out and tired and quiet quitting. Figure these things out that are burning. Forget the policies for COVID and the pens you're printing, because any machine can print a pen, but not many people can see how you feel.
Okay, so we're talking about psychological safety, huge, huge topic. I reference it all the time. Huge believer in it. So you've alluded to some of the materials that I've produced that help people focus on the psychological safety they have in their teams and how to improve it. Why do you believe, obviously, moving aside from the Aristotle project, in your experience, why is psychological safety so fundamental? Why is it so important?
I both can tell you why it's so important, but I can also tell you why it's not moving any faster. Maybe we don't need that necessarily now, but it's one of my bad bugs, obviously, is that when I encountered the topic, it had existed for 20 years. It wasn't news to anyone, but I hadn't heard of it really other than through the DevOps report. Thank God for the DevOps report, otherwise I would have not even paid attention to the term. It sounded to me fluffy, like to everyone else, like, oh, we need to be sure we have a job, so why don't we let everyone not work and get cheese from the fridge then, so that we can have psychological safety, which is absolutely not the case. It's not what psychological safety is. This sounds a bit like the pandemic. Do you remember those Zooms in the pandemic when we had hundreds of ambulances on the street? That was really scary, when we had to talk to people while knowing that others were dying around. So
Well, yeah, there was a time in the pandemic when you had no idea what was going on. It was very unknown. You work. There were times in the UK, for anyone listening globally, there were some really strange rules in the UK. At one point, you were only allowed out of your house for a maximum amount of time, 30 minutes a day for exercise, and you weren't allowed to speak to anyone. You weren't allowed to go for coffee with people. There were police drones going around the malls, walking areas in the UK, telling people off for going for long walks together because that could somehow put a burden on the ambulance service. Otherwise, if someone fell over and got injured, it was a really odd time. And obviously, everyone was doing the best they could with the information they knew they had available to them. But everyone was panicking and they weren't sure what to do. And the working world was thrust into the situation where everyone had to work remotely, and that was a very new thing for many people. And yeah, people again, many companies at the time didn't know what psychological safety was, let alone how
we
to foster an environment for it.
we
They still
actually
don't now.
started pretty much, so people not started pretty much at the cusp of the pandemic, just as that we were getting locked down in England, and we had a couple of potential clients at the very beginning, but we had went through some incarnations of the product. We didn't want to come out with anything that wasn't genuinely helpful, and we had already sunk a good couple million, maybe, or not, maybe not quite that bad. I don't want my board to freak out. Trying various incarnations of it, one being a perfect teams product, which was an idiotic idea. Let me put it in short for you, and upset the entirety of half of an industry of them trying to match perfect people by psychometric testing. Don't even get me started. Bad idea, horrible idea, cost us loads of money and time to figure that out, but we did. And then second one, which we tried on our own skin, was making a leadership development product. I still don't think it's a bad idea, but we were starting at the wrong place. So we've on our own skin realized that making leaders be vulnerable is great, but it's not going to make you psychological safety. Making perfect teams, great idea on paper, BS, never going to work in real life. What you need is whatever teams you have, make sure that these people can start figuring out that the other human is a human and that they care about them and that they want to make something together. That's your only to do in a team. um yeah, so we went through some incarnations before we arrived at how to measure psychological safety as a team and how to do something about it as a team. Stop waiting for HR, stop waiting for Santa to fix your organization. This is all of our individual human work put together at a team level.
And I love the focus there that this isn't just an HR responsibility. It's not just a leadership responsibility. It's a human responsibility. It's something. It's a bit like to me creating leaders at all levels. And to me, a leader is someone who exhibits or creates an environment of psychological safety for other people, not just for themselves, and not just for their subordinates, if you want to use language like that. So I love the focus here on bringing the responsibility for creating this environment internally to the teams, creating the awareness of what it is and what the conditions are that hinder it and amplify it, and then yeah, making it their responsibility, their collective responsibility, rather than any one individual or group or team or transformation team or leadership or whatever you want to label it. I love that
Right, we
focus.
have found, we again, trial and error. We, like I said, we made all these incarnations where they were individual or they were addressing themselves to the team, but only the leader saw them, or they were trying things. So we've tried all kinds of things. In particular, during the pandemic, like I say, we started at that time, which meant that we couldn't really sit on software that was useful for people's lives. So we opened the doors and we said anyone who wants to use it can use it for free, and they did for a good year. It's been the most insane time of learning for the product, but it's also been very difficult to kind of support that many people. But I think it's been useful and transformational for maybe we came in. We not only show them good behaviors and bad behaviors of for themselves. No one else needs to see it. By the way, this is not some tool we're making for HR to see how they feel. This is for the team to know and to do something about it. And before we ended to that place, people were skewing responsibility even more. People were a lot less interested in trying any of this human work. And look, I'm not claiming it, and everyone joyously wants to start doing some human work. Just in the same way that no individual joyously wants to start doing more work on themselves. So I don't think any intelligent human being is refuting the science of well-being. Yeah, there's nobody out there that goes, no, I don't believe Harvard, I don't believe any of these big names from Yale. I think that's BS. No one needs gratitude. No one needs walking. I'm not going to do it, right? So no one with an intelligent mind is arguing with the science of well-being at an individual level. They know they need to do these things. They know they need to breathe, to meditate, to take space from their lives, to have some perspective, to do something for their physical body or their intellectual mind, whatever. But why are we fighting that? Is because it's hard. It's not an easy thing to change your behavior or to do things consistently. But instead of focusing on how do we build this habit to do these things consistently, we're focusing on maybe I don't quite need it and maybe I can get to be lazy and not do it. And it's not never the answer for an individual. It's never the answer for the team either. So just kind of not doing it and hoping we'll be fine without it, it's not going to work. It will take some time. It doesn't have to be very difficult. Learning about EQ and fluffy human things is uncomfortable to knowledge workers, but we have ways of making it easier, and we'll all get there eventually.
It's definitely uncomfortable for people. Change is uncomfortable, right? We as humans have evolved to seek homeostasis. We seek that path of least resistance. We seek comfort. If we're hot, we take off clothes. If we're hungry, we eat. And doing the difficult work, especially if it's not part of our day-to-day habits, is it's tough and it takes time to build. But I do like the focus on developing the team habits that do erode this human debt over time because it that's the way you address things, like by doing it habitually on a day-to-day basis. You don't just burn yourself out doing sprints and sprints of it and then and then stop. It's that the best results come from consistently applying something over time. And I guess this is why for me Agile works so well, because it builds in that rhythm and that cadence where you do things on a habitual way, and you get those fast feedback loops that maybe to learn and adjust and say, hey, this is working for us, let's do more of that, and this is not working, let's do less of that. So that's where retrospectives come in for me. That's why I'm such a proponent for them. Okay, so you've built this tool, this product, this way of gauging at the team level, so it's their data, how we are doing on a psychological safety perspective. What are the signs that a team has low psychological safety in your experience?
Nothing you haven't heard before, and this always sounds like people they immediately take it very personally and they feel very victimized because these are behaviors that we all have at some point. I think what's important is not so much to figure out what the collection of behaviors is, but kind of to really create this practice of always being curious about how the other person feels in the team. We don't have a practice of curiosity. We have to overcome this bias of professionalism and being a professional at work where we don't inquire about each other's lives. We don't have a practice of closeness with others. One of the our software comes with something called a playbook, and we have plays in there, meaning just kind of things that the developer team could do without asking anyone on their own to change their behavior. And they take they're focused on different aspects of the behavior. If they're less courageous, they'll get to do a bitch fest and talk to each other about what they're really upset about. If they have been kind of morose with each other, they need to connect again, they might do a humor hackathon and just have a lighter day. Or if they are a team that hasn't really gotten close to each other, of which there are millions. I don't comprehend how people can work with each other for months and years and not know if they have kids. Then they need to do a team equals family. Let us figure out who has what pets sort of conversation. How do people program together if they don't know if the other one has a child or not? What are the odds they're doing good work together if they cannot communicate about anything even remotely human? Like, forget the children. Maybe some people are being all they want to keep their information private. I get a lot of that. None of it is true, but whatever, let's pretend it is. So when you move past those and you are conscious of, no, this is a human interaction, I have to be kind to this human and I have to get them to be kind to me, and we have to make something together. That is what we need to change, and we can change that by isolating these particular behaviors that are bad and doing less of them when we know them, and good and doing more of them. Just CBT for teams, really.
I like your reference to a playbook. Now, I'm a fan of this term, but I know that it's often misused. It's been associated with many consultancy copy and paste style. Here's your agile playbook. You will go and do this, and it's a kind of a one size fits all cookie cutter type approach. I love using the term playbook to mean, right, this is the problem you're facing. And here are some options that you could try that may help you in your context. And they're experiments. Everything's an experiment. So give it a go, learn from it. If it works, great, do it again, or do more of it, or adjust it and tailor it for your context. If it doesn't work, that's okay. Here's another option that you might try. It might fit your context better. And it sounds to me that you've got a similar approach to this playbook style. Here's a problem you may have, and here are some things that you could try that might help. And I think a bitch fest, just getting that, those
Mhm.
complaints out of the air sometimes can be very powerful. Just a way of getting things off your chest rather than allowing things to build up and contempt to build and frustration to build and all that stuff. So
One of
yeah,
the things I should
interesting
have said
interesting
probably,
turn.
and I didn't, is that we tend to keep our playbook crowdsourced. So when we notice that one play has worked really well on the data of a team, we'll go knocking at the team's door and say, "Hi, can you walk us through why you did this and how you did this?" And if they did it in a standard way, then we might promote it somehow. But if they did something else, we'll sit down with them and we'll include that from their success in the playbook. So it's crowdsourced, but then it's curated by our specialists. But what we also do and what we're really big on is we don't think of our software as the ultimate measuring tool. We don't really care. I mean, we have a super strong algorithm that can read your mind if it tries, but I don't care about that at all. What I care about is the communication space, is the fact that these knowledge workers now have a tool that will listen, encourage them to talk to each other, make them be curious about their behavior as a team, and then make them do something together. Those are the conversations I need these teams to have. That is the human work in itself. So the fact that they choose between what play to do, should we do a humor hackathon, should we do one of these bitch fests, should we do any of them, the choosing, the discussion, why do we need that and not that, is the space we're trying to hold with the human work platform. That's so important, I think, because I don't care what they do in that time. I care that they are creating a time, a habit, and an understanding of the fact that they need to do the human work.
So it's really important to note here. This is not about replacing the conversation. It sounds like it's about, in the same way when I facilitate, you are raising the collective awareness of a challenge. You're saying, hey, we've got this challenge based on what we've all contributed towards. We've all had an input into this. We've got this challenge. And the question becomes, hey, what do we want to do with this new information? How will we work together to resolve it? Us against the problem, not an individual at fault here. Us against the problem. With this information, what do we want to do next? It's our experiment. What shall we try? And therefore we're bringing that empowerment and the autonomy for the team to decide what they'll do next with that collective understanding, and we're building in team cohesion from the beginning and how we approach going
Thank you.
forwards.
That is exactly it. We know it's the right thing. I've seen more developers cry when they realize that their actual actions are changing the way they live in their teams than you can imagine. Not they're not hundreds, but there are a few people I will always remember, because the moment when it occurs to you that something you do can change your life is not predetermined, and you don't have to answer to this dude and just want to die every Monday morning before the stand up. When you're valuable, you're important, we need you to be right there, we need you to have good behaviors, which are being flexible, being resilient, being emotionally curious and intelligent, all of those things. Do bring those things, care about the ones around you. Don't the famous don't be a dick, with a space to hold it.
Don't be a dick. It's one of my favorite company values I've ever seen. I think Huel in the UK have the same thing written on their wall. Just don't be a dick. It's a great motto I think many teams should live by. Just don't be
Indeed.
a dick. All right, there's another topic I'm really keen to get your thoughts on. It feels very, very interlinked to not necessarily just psychological safety, but human work and human focus. The 4-day work week has been on trial for a little while now. The data's in, or at least the early data's in, from a number of companies in the UK in particular, and it seems to be going well. I think over 90% of participating companies have decided to continue with a shorter work week, with 30% of them making it a permanent thing going forwards. What's your take on the 4-day work
Well,
week, man?
I've just finished, and it's coming out in October, a book called Tech Led Culture. And in this book, a lot of the focus has been on these new things that we have supposedly battled with after the, kind of, where is it going? Where is the future of work? How do we see remote? How do we see the content of work? How does that all fit into agile and all those themes in the book? I have this personal theory that culture is now going to be driven by technology. Practically, technology is what's going to drive us into better human culture, which is ironic eventually. But outside of that, I've had to go, in particular for my editors' contentment, through all of these, like what is quite quitting, what's the deal with all of them, and I'm a big, like I said, I'm neurodiverse. So to me, everything has to fit clearly into concept, or we're having words. Like if it doesn't fit, we're we're gonna have to discuss it. And I think they all of the things we're looking at neatly fit into different crises in the workplace, whether it's a crisis of engagement, or it's a crisis of leadership, or it's a crisis of mental health. And the crisis of mental health is not one we have created in the workplace only. It's we're coming, at it with societal issues. We're coming at it with the pandemic that left all of us in shambles. Let's face it, I don't think anyone is properly rebuilt or has been sorting themselves afterwards, but we like to pretend we're good. So all of those things are in the mental health crisis, and we're seeing it at work, in particular in the UK in a tremendous way, but everywhere else in the world as well. And it seems to be the absolute biggest sustainability challenge that is now discussed at level of climate change issues over the next few years, because the alarm has to be ranked that no one is well. We're talking 1 in 2 people are dealing with mental health issues at work. It's in the knowledge industry, it's higher. So we have that issue to play with. Then we have an engagement crisis, which is resulting in people going, I'm either quietly quitting, which is probably the best alternative, or actively disengaged and torpedoing every meeting we're having over here. So if you start looking at the crisis of engagement, it includes all of these things. And then if you finally look at the crisis of leadership, who don't know how to grab this and move it into anything of sustainable value, then where we are is at this moment where we aren't really landing, in my view, the winds of the pandemic. Because to my mind, the win of the pandemic has been the fact that we've landed this proof of concept of remote work. There's no reason for the knowledge industry to be doing anything else than what I call WHAA, which is working from home from anywhere. Working from anywhere anytime. Sorry, my bad. I'm tired. My executive function is gone and I'm menopausal. But working from anywhere anytime is the only answer to it all, I think. Figure out as a team what is a joint action, a group action, a more than an us action, and what is a me action. Do all your me actions whenever and however you feel fit. Figure that out. You're a grown professional. Don't commit to things that you don't know when you're going to be giving them back, but also the things you're going to be giving them back, do them at your own bloody leisure, unless you're pair programming and having to be in a stand-up. So I trust that professionals are going to take a lot more responsibility in saying, no, I need more. I need a block of time in build for this. I need to come back to you in three, I don't know, story points and not two. I am over capacity. I'm being burnt out. I can't do it anymore. I need people to be responsible for their part in these crises while we're trying to work on the organization to stop giving them the other crisis. And the way organization is going to do that is recognizing they have human debt and starting to work on it.
So we've touched on many things there related, I think, to the 4-day work
I
week.
know.
Did you have a kind of final thought, a kind of summary? Are you for it? Do you believe it will help with some of these challenges around burnout, mental health challenges, increasing the ability for people to
I
WFAA?
think it will help that we're talking about it, but it would help more if we said, let's just figure out what fits us best. Forget 4 days, 3 days, 1 days, 80 days. What are the outcomes that we're trying to get, and what can I apply myself? How do I apply myself? How do we as a team make this happen? Forget this entire what days it is in and where it is happening. I just think that anytime we allow for that, we go on a tangent and just shortening people's lives, kind of taking the same amount of work, the same amount of disrespect, the same amount of human debt, and trying to cram it into 4 days is not going to do away with it. What we need to do is clean it up before we figure out how many days and where.
So being outcome focused rather than the number of days
For
focused
sure.
is the way forward for you. Interesting. For anyone also interested in this particular study, I think the BBC have released articles showing how the UK have responded to this trial of 4-day work week. As I mentioned, over 90% of participating companies are continuing with it. I think 71% of employees that were part of the program felt reduced burnout and had improved physical and mental well-being. So it does sound like it may address some of these challenges. It isn't a one size fits all. So some companies also dropped out of the program. They learned it didn't fit them. Some of these were kind of service based, and they felt it was difficult to manage the ongoing needs of their clients. So I don't think it is a one size fits all, but it's definitely something to think about, especially if you have some of these major problems like disengagements, like people quiet quitting and things like that. It could be something to explore, especially where it was also noted that productivity didn't drop despite this change. We've run out of time on the show, Duena, so it's been a pleasure to have you today. Where can our listeners learn more about you, your work, about human debt, about your books, about this great psychological safety focused product
Well,
you've got out there?
I do speaking and writing, obviously. So there's a duenablomstrom.com that people can go to, but I also write two different newsletters every week, one called Chasing Psychological Safety, and the other one called The Future is Agile. Both of them are on LinkedIn. You can subscribe to them there. They're still absolutely free for all 250 subscribers of mine for now, but we're moving maybe towards a different model at some point. But for now, everything out there is completely free. Just go look at everything. We make a product, like I say, called it's at peoplenotech.com. It helps teams try to do some of this human work, start on it, because it's not going away. It's not going to be less of it if we ignore it, and we're not going to learn how to do it and continuously improve if we don't start already.
Amazing. For anyone who missed that, Duena has 6 times the amount of followers I do on LinkedIn, over 250,000. Insane. So if you're not following her, you probably should be. She's got some great things being shared. I hope our listeners have been inspired to do what's within their power to make time for reducing human debt, for creating an environment where people can feel, be their best selves on their best day, be supported on their worst day. Before you go, if you found this episode valuable, of course you did, but why not share it with someone who's as cool as you are? And if you want to stay abreast with the latest episodes, don't forget to follow or subscribe to the show. As always, folks, don't stop believing, and we'll see you
Thank
next
you.
time. Thank you again, Duena.